Glenn Suter with us, who was listening as the commissioner was speaking. Glenn, do you like what you heard from Commissioner Luc Mullinder?
I like a lot of what I heard. Yeah, I thought he made some great points. I thought he touched on, what we're all kind of hoping to hear sometime this week when the league does make their announcement after their meetings.
Yeah, no blueprint for a pandemic. He said stakeholders several times. He said we need to move as one. There was one that you thought he missed on. What phrase did he not have?
Pivot. You got to be ready to pivot.
Yeah. But he dropped, we're going to talk to our partners. We're going to sit down, conversations. Good times. Good times.
Yeah.
What do you think, Suits, players will want to hear? Whatever the commissioner says after the meeting on Tuesday with the Board of Governors, what do you think the players feel is important to hear?
Well, I think it's important to hear their actual, 2 or 3 plans that could unfold, because with the uncertainty, it's almost impossible, as Luc mentioned, almost impossible for the commissioner to come out on Wednesday or whenever it is and say, we're playing on July 12th. It's impossible to know where the vaccine rollout will be, how many people will be inoculated, how many people will we still be in a peak in this virus's evolution, so it's impossible to say that date. But what he can do is say, we're postponing the season. That won't come as any surprise, but we are going to look at 2 possible start times, one with a 16-game schedule or a 14-game schedule, let's say, and one with a 12-game schedule that would start in September and, or late mid-August, and have temporary or, dates in and around the second week in August would be our plan B. Mm-hmm. And just have those targets, and then have another date ready to roll out, which would be when the next update will come. In other words, I hope the commissioner this week will say, we will get back to you in the next 10 days, unless there's new news immediately, as far as medical approval, protocols, things like that. But if the commissioner says, look, in every 10 days, every 2 weeks, I will be addressing football fans in our country, including our players privately and behind closed doors with the PA. We're working closely on the return to play plan, and they'll be updated, and we're going to continue to work with them on a daily basis. I think we want details in that regard. You don't have to give the exact date of a kickoff time when you can't possibly nail that down right now.
Yeah.
You can give approximates, and you can say, we've got 2 plans, a 14-game schedule as it stands right now that would start in mid-July, and a 12-game schedule that would start in early August.
And I like to do your idea there, because you and I have talked about the void. And if you leave a void, we're all just going to fill it. Be us talk radio hosts, be us CFL fans. We're going to fill it with whatever we think makes sense, or whatever we can kind of squish into making sense, right? So I really like the idea of whatever comes on Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever it is this week, some sort of regular, hey, I'm going to be here every other Tuesday. I'm just throwing that out there with an update for you, or just give it to the players, and some side is going to leak that out to the media, just so that we have something to know. What am I going to do with my summer? When is my team going to be back? When can I start supporting my guys again?
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's a few others that I hope we also hear. I hope he does address the XFL discussions. When was the last time they talked? When is the next time they will talk? If there's any, details that they can give us at that time, my guess is no, but if there is, and what that all means. I mean, Gary Stern today, one of the owners of the Montreal Alouettes, mentioned that, and I'll quote him, and I wrote it down because I wanted to be, quote exactly what Gary Stern said. One of the owners of the Montreal Alouettes, he said, "I'm not hiding. I told you I'm in. I'm committed. I'm not running anywhere. We're funding this." And they were talking about return to play in 21. So that just came from an owner who's going into these meetings tomorrow. And so now that messaging in the under the umbrella of transparency from from the commissioner has got to reflect that same promise that they are all committed, every owner, every team, 100% committed to getting back on the field in 21, unless the government says we're not allowed to do it. But anything other than that, we're playing at some point, whether there's fans in the stands or not. We're going to play. And here are the 2 or 3 plans. And here's the dates that we will absolutely update you, all the stakeholders, coming up in the next, every 2 weeks or whatever that may be.
Yeah. So you want to hear dates. You want to hear about the XFL. Anything else you want the commissioner to say?
Yeah, I'd like to see if they have discussed, and he said many times that, they can do more than one thing at a time. So that would include maybe XFL discussion still ongoing. That could include their return to play plan. That should also include any Canadian-made solutions with the economics of the league, any Canadian-made solutions that they're working on to rework the business model. If, XFL discussions go for 3 or 4 years, which would probably be prudent for both sides anyway. But I'd love to hear that there are those discussions happening, that they are looking at the business model and what they can do internally to work on that. I'd love to see and hear announcements tied in with our coverage TSN-wise from the television network side.
Yep.
Once we get those sort of July and then August, we can get some programming planned and ready to go in the lead up to a new season in 21. Ticket packages and announcements on how you would do that as a fan with your local clubs and when you should start doing that, and looking at how you'd make adjustments in your season ticket packages with plan A and plan B coming up. So those are all, and maybe the most important, are they right now discussing, DT, the possibility of generating revenues from single game gambling in conjunction with the government signing off on that, on Bill C-218, and getting that done. And that I'd love to hear the commissioner say, we are already in preliminary discussions with what could be a big chunk of new revenue coming in. And we are in discussions with principals on gambling at football games, how you could do it in stadium, how you can do it in single game.
Yeah. Getting a gambling partner, a league-wide gambling partner, could be more money than a base on which the Grey Cup would sit, would certainly be good. Of course, talking to Glenn Suter and Fine Tailored Suits on the Sports Cage. I was trying to think. I went back and pulled out dates of things that happened in the 2020 season, and I was curious to yak with you about how would the CFL change and approach 2020 if it could, because they have a chance to change it because we're doing this calendar year thing over again as we approach a season. So let me throw out some dates and we'll discuss. On March 12th of 2020, the CFL decided it's going to cancel the combines. It announced it would cancel the combines. On March 19th, it closed every team's facility. On March 30th, it said training camps are postponed indefinitely. On May 20th, the CFL of 2020 said we're not going to start until at least September. So in the beginning, in March, when we had no idea what was happening with the world around us, there was at least constant announcements from the CFL. We know we're supposed to be doing stuff, but this is what's happening. And then if there's any announcement, it struck me that if there's any announcement this week about the season, that's a full month ahead of what we had in 2020. And I didn't know it was that late that they announced that the season was going to be delayed till September.
Yeah, that's what, when you go back and think about that, there was a real sort of global fear factor that was hitting everyone at that time. It was, what can we possibly do and still sort of move forward slowly and carefully, not knowing what this pandemic and what this virus was all about? Well, we know a lot more. There are leagues that have played. There are leagues that have played in the bubble. There are leagues that are currently playing that have had issues, like the Vancouver Canucks and how they got out of it. And you and I both know that the CFL is talking with all those that have advised the NHL on how to get their protocols as tight as they can. And that, even saying that, it can still break down on you, as the Vancouver Canucks have found out. So, I think that they're so much more ahead than they were in March of last year, April of last year, as far as understanding the virus and understanding what's possible, looking at the vaccination rollout schedule. I mean, if the gloom and doomers, I'll call them, are right, everyone that's buying tickets for CFL games in the last 10 years are going to be vaccinated in the next week or so in our country, the 50 plus.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, if that's all that are watching CFL games and we're putting 35,000 in Mosaic Stadium and they're all 50 plus, well, they're going to be vaccinated soon. So how does that work into the process? You know, I think we can be so much more organized moving forward this year than we were this time last year because, you know, we know so much more about the virus itself.
Yeah, and its impacts and where we are, and we see the light at the end of the tunnel, right? Like I don't know where you guys are at in BC, but like I at 46 just got my first dose of the vaccine, the 2-dose vaccine. So I have to wait a month or 4 months, somewhere in that range, to get the second dose. So it could be August where I get the second dose of the vaccine, and then people will start to think, oh, okay, well, now I feel comfortable with where we are at. Where's BC at?
Yeah, I've registered, so I'm the 50 group, and so is my wife. My daughter registers; she's 30, and she'll register on Wednesday, and that's just registration, so it's not your first shot. So we're looking at probably for me the next couple of weeks. I do want to say though, for all listeners, I am 100% getting vaccinated as soon as I can, and I'm getting vaccinated whichever one they have available at the time, or whichever one they hand me, and let's get after it because we want to get our lives back, and this is how we do it. So I want to make sure that message is out there loud and clear. But, you know, again, I respect everyone's own opinion on how they're going to handle this. You know, it's been disappointing. I know a couple of shows ago, I called him Pierre, his dad's name, but Justin needs to keep working at it and keep getting these vaccines out to us, because when I look south of the border and the way they started this pandemic,
yeah,
and how they were kicking it around so badly, and what a simple change in leadership did for that country. Now I'm not talking about the politics of it. I'm just saying, if you look at the vaccination process, if you look at how the virus was handled, as soon as there was a change in leadership, and you could take this across every city, country, family, the leadership is the key. And if the leadership is doing what's right and doing it as quickly as they possibly can, and going after what the real problem is with get needles in arms as fast as you can, we can all get our lives back. But if you don't, and if you're making bad deals and vaccination companies aren't sending you the product, and you don't make it at home,
yeah,
and you haven't worked on any of that stuff, I don't want to get into the politics of it, but you know what I'm saying, DT?
Yeah.
This is they've vaccinated their whole country, basically 300 plus million. They're over 200 million. They're going to be done by the end of this month, and we're not even close.
First doses and things like that. Yeah, they're really going on, and the Americans have the manufacturing capacity, so they're going to get first access to it. We in Canada have to wait a little bit. I will always think back to very early on when there was a health official at the world level talking about responses to the pandemic, and it's better to be fast than to be 100%, than to wait till you're 100% right? So there are times where, okay, well, maybe I don't feel like I should go get my shot right now because other people might need it more. They're not doing frontline workers in our province the way they should be doing it. It's not perfect, but just get it done. Just in my mind, just get it. Get it done. Get it done when they tell you it's your turn. Because one, the drive-through here in Regina is out for 2 weeks, so I'm very thankful I got it first thing Friday morning. But two, eventually they'll get to everybody, and if you're waiting for government to be perfect, you're gonna die waiting. And
well, perfect is a word I don't even use because I don't think it exists. People overuse that word, and I don't think there's any such thing. But and there will be mistakes made. I get all of that, but I I can't quite get my head around why there can be 330 million people vaccinated just south of us, and we can't even get to the halfway mark in the same amount of time. Yeah, well, money and manufacturing, I get it all, but excuses. We're looking for leadership, and to be quite honest, when the commissioner stands in front of the podium, wherever that is this week, that's what we need to hear. We need to hear strong leadership, messaging, messaging, messaging. Control the narrative when you release it, and it'll take a lot of different paths after that. You know that. There'll be speculation, there'll be naysayers, there'll be people that don't like what he said in certain ways, but you can control the narrative when you release it, send the right messaging, and inspire people to get excited about seeing some football this year in 2021, because that's got to be the message coming out, I think, the commissioner overall.
You make a very important point there, saying that there are people who won't like what he says. I have some thoughts on, is there a win for the commissioner in what he'll say this week? We will discuss that on the other side of the break. 5:51 as we continue with Glenn Suter and Fine Tailored Suits, and talking about what the commissioner will say this week after the Board of Governors meeting. And Glenn, before the break, you said something I think is super important and kind of gives me the direction I would like the commissioner to go in. You said there are people who won't like what he says, and there may be a lot of people who won't like what he says. And I look at this and go, whatever he says, if he gives a date at which there'll be a further decision, or he doesn't give a date at all, people are going to hate it for various reasons. So in my mind, that is the absolute perfect reason to just do the right thing. Don't worry about how it's going to play, because it's going to play badly regardless. So just do the right thing for players, for the league, for the fans, for the league's partners. It's not going to be popular. There's no perfect statement he could make. So just do whatever you believe the right thing to do.
Yeah, I think one of the steps there could be that would really help would be to have a representation from the CFL Players Association with him.
Yes.
When he talks about it, and to say that they understand that flexibility is needed here, that they're trying to narrow down dates, get into sort of the first week August, that kind of thing, last week of July, whatever it may be, but to narrow it down, not necessarily this is going to happen on the 12th or 14th. So that would be one thing. But in a bigger picture, I think the commissioner wins if the messaging is all the owners are in. We all are working towards returning to play in 21, and we're going to make this happen somehow, as long as the Canadian government, provincial and federal, doesn't shut the door on us. And if they shut the door on us, and I'm not talking about funding, I'm talking about telling them they can't play, that the protocols aren't good enough, then we're playing. And if that's the only message I hear in the week, I'm good. I know we're playing. He's narrowing it down. We're going to get an update in the next 10 days or 2 weeks, and they're working on it. Yeah. That's what I want to hear.
It strikes me there's a real line for the commissioner to straddle in there to say, hey, we're ready to go when the provinces and the feds say we can. It would be an interesting move to put pressure on the federal government and the provinces, but you're also requesting some help from them in spots as well. So you really, if you're the commissioner, have to be careful in what you say. Well, maybe just how you word it in that time, because they are absolutely waiting on provinces to say, yes, you can go, or yes, you can't go. The word from Ontario wasn't particularly happy today, but the wording is going to need to be quite fine from the commission.
Well, it is, but I mean, the timing of any of this is tough right now in this third wave, especially in Ontario. But we also see that light, as you mentioned. So, I think you acknowledge how severe it is right now and what frontline workers are going through in their frustration. Acknowledge that, and so you're not tone deaf to that. But also then, talk about with great optimism that we are going to get out of this. We're going to turn the corner quickly when we get those vaccination percentages up. And then as soon as that happens, the ball starts rolling downhill and we can really narrow things down from then on. But I and I heard you guys talking earlier too about sometimes the league office or coaches or presidents or managers have, sort of their own thing that doesn't line up necessarily with what should be said publicly. I think that's a philosophy that's got to change drastically. I really do. I think whatever the commissioner and that office is thinking, they should let the fans know. And I, this is not nuclear codes or anything like that. This is a professional football league, and we are trying to, give the fans the product, first of all, and the great athletes back on the field, do it with great pride, stand in front of the podium and say, we love this game. We love the Canadian part of this game, and we're going to get it back on the field for you, the fans, and here's how. And I really think if we're going into meetings in the league office saying, well, we don't want them to know that, I think that's a mistake.
Really?
Yeah, I do.
There are things my wife and I would say to each other that I don't want the whole world to know. I feel like among 9 owners with divergent backgrounds and, divergent forms and interests, they're not going to want everything known either. You mentioned Herb Zurkowski column in the Gazette from the Montreal Alouettes saying, hey, we want to get on the field in 21. But what do they want in 2022? And do they want us all to know that? And who's pushing what, how hard? I feel like that's for a book that comes, 5 years afterward, as opposed to in advance. We have about 60 seconds left, Sue.
Yeah, no, I hear what you mean. I don't think you're putting a camera in the rooms where they're discussing a lot of these things. No. And I think when they come out of it, they come out with a consensus and the correct messaging. One thing that's always been missed, I think, for the last 30 years of my direct involvement with the league, either as a player or as an analyst, that the perception of our league and the perception, what people think about it, whether that's right or wrong, is something that's super powerful, and we've never really got a grip on it. You can control that perception with the proper messaging. And I think transparency is important. Honesty is important. Whatever you're thinking, let the fans know.
Suits, I can't wait to hear what the commissioner has to say, mostly because it might point us to a time where you and I can be here breaking down Cody Fajardo's performance in week number 6 against the Hamilton Tiger Cats. That's just every time something like this comes along, I'm like, at some point, we're going to be talking about what happened on the field, and I can't wait for that, my man.
Love it. Love it. And I'm also working on Garth Brooks just for you.
Mama. Suits, thank you so much.
Thanks, man. Take
Glenn
care.
Scooter every Monday and Thursday on the Sports Cage in fine tailored suits, brought to you by Quality Tire. 10 locations across Saskatchewan, qualitytire.ca.